Hey, Bezos Hashem. Today's daf is daf Chavtes, is daf Lamed, and we'll be beginning by Chavtes Amud Beis by just after the Mishnah, by the start of the Gemara. Okay, so we learned in the Mishnah. We're discussing a very interesting topic. The topic is that a shliach of a husband can he make another shliach? And I want to tell you, as a rule of thumb, generally speaking, when a shliach cannot make another shliach, generally speaking, a shliach cannot make another shliach. But by get, if we have been learning that if the husband gave a get to a shliach and then he got sick, so then we've learned that he could hire another shliach, and we only give this excuse only if the chola, if he got sick. If he didn't get sick, he cannot make another shliach. So once you're given the job to give the get over to the husband, to give the get over to the woman, only if you got sick, you can make another shliach. If not, then you can't. Now we learned in our Mishnah, just another point, that if someone brings a get from Medina Sayyam, right? Let's say he came from Italy to bring a get, then as soon as he arrived in Israel, he landed in the hospital, and so he got sick. So he can't finish the shlichus of bringing the get. So they make a bezdin where he is, and they hire another shliach. And before, I guess during that time, somebody has to say b'fani nechtem. So he says b'fani nechtem in front of those three people, and then the second shliach takes over. And when he gives the get to the isha, he doesn't have to say b'fani nechtem. In fact, he can't say b'fani nechtem. So would it make sense? So what does he say? He says, "Shliach bezdin ani. I am just a shliach bezdin, and therefore I'm the bezdin made sure that the original shliach said it, and therefore it's kosher." Okay, so that's it. Now, how many? The Gemara said like this: Amalei Rabbanan Lavimi Bereid Ravabo. Rabbanan said to Avimi, the son of Rababo, "Boy, my name is Rababo. Just ask for Rababo." Right? Avimi is the son, so the Rabbanan told Avimi to ask your father. Can you take another step further? One shliach hires another shliach. What happens if shliach number 2 wants to hire shliach number 3? Is that valid? So Amalahu, so Rababo answered, don't ask that question. Midiktani, because our Mishnah said, Ein hashaliach ha'acharoin, that the last shliach doesn't have to say b'fani nechtam. He just says, I'm a shliach bezdin. So our Mishnah doesn't use Ein hashaliach hasheni, but it says the last shliach. So it implies, our Mishnah implies that one shliach could hire another shliach, could hire another shliach. Mechlal d'mshave shliach, so that there is, he could send a shliach, he could make another shliach. So Rabbi Bo wants to sharpen his students and says, Elakita ba'yelechu. This should be a question. Ki meshave shliach bevezdin, afidu shloi bevezdin. When shliach number 2 makes shliach number 3, can he do it privately? Can he go over to shliach number 3 and says, I can't do it anymore, I'm making you the shliach to give the get to the wife? Or the shliach number 2 convene a bezdin and has to, and then can only then does he have a right to give it over to shliach number 3. Amalei, so Amrulais, the Rabbanan answered that, how like to be bailam. We don't have that question. Midiktani, because the Mishnah says, Ela oime shliach bezdin ani. And that the person that's giving the get to the woman has to say, I'm a shliach bezdin. And the order to do that is only if he was appointed by bezdin. So that case, if shliach number 2 wants to make a shliach number 3, he has to do it in front of bezdin, so that when shliach number 3 approaches the woman with the get, he can say, I was appointed by bezdin. And that's the most important thing. Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak Masni Hachi. Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak just had the story a little differently.
Your notes. Enjoy a tag. I'll make you. There's no comment scheme.
This is the boy name Rabbo. Ask from a Rabbo. Shliach the shliach kimishav shliach bebezdin or shloi bebezdin. The question that the Rabbanan asked Rabbo is if shliach number 2 hiring shliach number 3 has to do it in bezdin or not bebezdin. Amalahu. So on this, Rabbo asks back with a question. You know how the rabbi asks you back. You're asking me if shliach number 2 has to, when he hires shliach number 3, does he have to do it in bezdin or not? Just ask the bigger question: can shliach number 2 hire shliach number 3? Can he actually hire another shliach? Amrlu, so the Rabbanan answered, that we certainly don't have a question. Now we learned in the Mishnah, there is the last shliach does not have to say befani nachman. He just says I'm a shliach bezdin. But the fact that it uses the word acharoin, the last shliach, bechlal the shliach mishav shliach, that we know shliach number 2 could make shliach number 3. It could go, and shliach number 3 can make shliach number 4. Al kikim abaylan, when the subsequent shliachim are hiring somebody else to take their place, do they have to do it bebezdin or shlei bebezdin? Amalahu, on this, the Rabbi Bo was the one that answered. This you shouldn't have this question. All they have to say is shliach bezdin ani. If he has to say, if the last shliach before he's giving it over to the woman has to say I'm a shliach bezdin, because he's not saying befani nachvan nechtam, because he's not the original shliach, but he had to have been appointed by bezdin to be able to say that. So therefore, if shliach number 2 wants to hire shliach number 3, they have to do it in front of a bezdin. Gemara continues, new Gemara. Amar Rabba, shliach beretz Yisrael oiseh kama shluchim. Okay, that we know from the Mishnah, and that's a fact. If somebody's bringing a get from the north from Tzfas to Jerusalem, so if he can't make it to Jerusalem, he can hire this shliach, and that shliach, if he can't make it to Jerusalem, he'll hire another shliach, because it continues and continues. So you can hire like 4 or 5 shluchim to get the get to her. Amar Ravashi says, if the first shliach dies, then all the shlichim don't have are not. Then the whole shlichus is nullified. If the first shliach has to stay around, he was the original shliach of the husband. He has to be alive up until the point where the actual get is given over to the lady. That's what Ravashi postulated. Amar Mar bar Ravashi. You see how he talks about his father. Mar, the son of Ravashi, said, "Hada Abba." When my father said this, the katnusahi. He was thinking he said it when he was younger and thinking with a smaller mind, because it's not who cares if the first shliach dies. Ilu meis baal mida b'shash isbu. Who's the most important? If the husband dies, can you give a get? If the husband died, none of the shlichim can give the get, because he can't give a get after the husband died. Kulu mekoyach man kasu. So all the shlichim, from where did they get their power from? Mekoyach the bal kasu. They're getting it from the husband. So that's the point. Is labal, as long as the original husband is alive, even if one of the shluchim die, even if the first shliach dies, doesn't matter. It's near l'kula. They're all considered valid, and therefore you could still give the get. Leisa labal, if the husband dies, that's the whole point. Leisa l'kula, they're not. Then there is no shlichus anymore. Obviously, the Gemara tells a story. Ahu Gavra, there was this man, the Shada Gittin Daf. He sent the get to his wife, right? So Amar Shliach, so the Shliach said to the husband, listen, you want me to give it to your wife? Lo yadanala. I don't know how your wife looks. I won't be able to give it to her. So what he said was, Amalei, so the man said to the Shliach, Zil Yahavelei Abba Bar Ben Yumi. Go give it over to Abba Bar Ben Yumi. The Yadala, he knows who my wife is. So now the Shliach, instead of being the one giving it over to the woman, turned into somebody who's giving the get over to somebody else who's going to give it over to the woman. And all with the instructions of the husband. So, he, this Abba Bar Ben Yumi, is going to give it over to her. So now the Gemara says, Asa, the Shliach came, Abba Bar Ben Yumi. He couldn't find Abba Bar Ben Yumi. Ashkechle, Rabba Bo, Rab Chanina, Ba Papa, Rab Yitzchak, Na Papa. He found Rabbi Bo, Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Yitzchak, and V'yasov Rav Safra. Rav Safra was sitting on the side. So he found these 3 rabbis, and he told them, I'm looking for this Abba Bar Ben Yumi because I have to give him a get to give to the woman. Amrulei, so they told him, Misar Milach Kaman Didan, give your words, give your instructions to us. In other words, tell us what you are instructed to do. You were instructed to give it over to Abba Bar Ben Yumi. Give that instruction over to us. When Rabbi Ben Yumi will come to us, we're going to give him the get. He's going to give it to her. So, l'chayra, this is the case of a shliach making another shliach. So they said this is valid. So Rav Shafra is sitting there on the side, and he wonders about this whole thing. Amalu Rav Safra v'ashliach shlei nitin legerushin hu. The shliach was not in the shliach is not a shliach that was supposed to give the get over to her. He was only supposed to give it over to Abba Bar Menyumi, and therefore he's not a gerushin type of shliachas. And as explained in the beginning, that this idea of one shliach hiring another shliach only applies by gittin. Maybe it says v'shalach v'shalcha, but in most cases, one shliach cannot hire another shliach. So how could this shliach, whose only purpose was not to divorce the lady, but was to give it over to Abba Bar Menyumi, hire these three rabbis to give it over to Abba Bar Menyumi and make them take his place as a shliach? That's what Rav Safra asked all these three rabbis, what are you doing? Ichsafu. They were all embarrassed. They felt that Rav Safra was correct in rebuking them. Rava, so Rava said, "Kapichna Rav Safra letlase Rabba Samicha." Rav Safra cut short these three great rabbis because he knocked them down for what they were trying to do. Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi b'may kapichini. Why did he cut them down? Mi ka'amalei Abba Bar Menyumi v'le'at. The original husband wanted this shliach to give the get over to the wife. It's only when plan A is not going to work out, he gave her plan B, that if you can't give it over to her, give it over to Abba Bar Menyumi. But really, he is a shliach of the husband to divorce the lady. He just doesn't know where to find that lady. So in that case, he's a shliach of gerushin, and therefore, shliach of gerushin, that's what we're learning. A shliach of gerushin can hire somebody else to take their place. So that's what Rav Ashi defended the three rabbis. The story was a little bit different, but the same outcome. Rava was said, Rava said that Rav Safra tried to cut these rabbis down, and it's all a big mistake. And it was Rav Ashi who asked, B'mai Tu'usa, what was this mistake? So my Kamales, Rava was the one that defended the three rabbis in this version. He said, Abba Bar Menyumi, did he say Abba Bar Menyumi should bring the get and not you? Of course, he originally wanted you to bring the get, so he is considered a shliach of Gittin, and he could hire somebody else to take his place, and that's why he hired the three rabbis. Next Gemara, Hahu Gavra, another story. A man sent a get to his wife. Don't give it to her for 30 days. So what happened was, during the 30 days, something happened. He could not. He became sick during the 30 days, and now he's not supposed to give the get over right now. He's supposed to wait till 30 days and then to give the get over. So prior to the time that he's supposed to give the get over to the lady, can he hire another shliach to take his place? Also, the comment the Rava that came to Rava, why can a person who's sick hire another shliach? It's not his fault. Honestly, it's not his fault. Amalei, so Rava said to the sick shliach, give us the instructions, and the instruction was that we should not give the get to the lady till after 30 days. We're going to follow through on that. But after 30 days, you make us the shliach, and we're going to give it to her. So basically, it's a shliach making a shliach prior to him being a real shliach baal, because he's not supposed to give the get over till 30 days. And Rava is now taking that place. Amalei Rabban Rava, so the Rabban said to Rava, right now, the shliach that's hiring a Rava to take his place is not a shliach of the husband to give a get, because he has no permission to give the get prior to 30 days. So if it's prior to 30 days, how can he hire another shliach to take his place? He's not a shliach of get. And only a shliach of get we allow to hire another shliach to take his place. So Rava answered, he really is a shliach of get, because since kiven the labasa tlasiyim in motzi megarish shliach shnitl gerushin, since after 30 days from now he's going to become a shliach of gerushin, so therefore we consider him as if at this moment he's a shliach of gerushin, and therefore he could hire me to take his place, says Rava, as his shliach. So now the Gemara asks, but if a man says, and here's the interesting thing, a man says, here's a get, he says to the shliach, the Gemara is bringing up another problem. Again, a man says, to the shliach, bring this get to my wife, but don't give it to her till after 30 days. So the question is, how could the shliach give it to her after 30 days maybe maybe he reconciled with his wife, and he was mevatel the get. The way we're going to learn, he said that he doesn't want the get anymore, and you're giving her a get, and really the husband made up with his wife. Me like Tanan, we have this idea. If the man says, I want this get to start now, but it shouldn't take if I don't, it's dependent on a condition. If I don't come from now till 12 months, and he died during the 12 months, so he's never coming back. It's a get, because his condition was the get should take effective now, unless I come home during the next 12 months. And he died during during those 12 months, it's a get. So the Gemara asked over there, maybe they reconciled. In other words, maybe it turns out that he reconciled with her, and it's another problem called the get yashid. I'm not going to go into it, but that was the question over there. So that the Mishnah over there, it's only because the husband said that if the woman said we didn't reconcile, the husband said, I will believe this woman. You should always believe her, not me. So anyway, you always have this problem when a man says, give this get to my wife after 30 days. Well, why should the shliach follow through on those instructions? The shliach doesn't know that maybe the husband and wife got back together. They had shalom bayis. So Rava got upset. The Saif, he didn't know what to answer that question. It turned out that this case of the man said, only give this get to my wife after 30 days, he was only engaged to her. He never went to chuppah with that lady. If they say married couples make up and reconcile, that doesn't mean engaged couples reconcile. Therefore, you can feel Rava felt comfortable giving the get after 30 days, because he was certain that the husband and wife didn't reconcile without him knowing about it, because they were only engaged. They were never really married. Rava asked the said, this is the question. We go to Lamed Amalav. This is the question that is a good question. When Shliach 1 gives it over to Shliach number 2, does Shliach number 1 have to be present when Shliach number 2 is being hired by the Bezdin? Does he have to be present? The Shliach number 1 says, I'm sick, I can't take this, but I hire Shliach number 2. Does Shliach number 1 has to see that the Bezdin hired Shliach number 2? So this was the answer. Shliach number 2 does not have to see Shliach number 1. Shliach number 1 does not have to see Shliach number 2. Shliach number 1 just goes to Bezdin and says, just find a Shliach to take my place. Then he goes home. And then the Bezdin will find Shliach number 2 to take his place. But before Shliach number 1 goes home, he has to say, B'fani nechta. Now we go to a familiar Gemara we had many times before. If a man said that if I don't come back for 30 days, then it's a get. So he tells, honey, here's your wife, here's your get. If I don't come back in the next 30 days, this get will be valid. Also, he came back, but he got delayed because the ferry to ferry him across to his home was stuck, and therefore he couldn't cross. And therefore, he really wanted to come back and to nullify the get. He said to him, Chazud. He said to everybody, see, I'm coming. I don't want it to be a get. Shmuel said, Lo shmei masya. Too bad. You didn't come home. You have a reason, is oinus, that you couldn't cross the moat to your home. That's something you should have considered beforehand, and don't show up at the last minute. And there's no concept of oinus bagittin. In other words, ein oinus bagittin means we don't accept a excuse that's not your fault by get. If the Tanai condition wasn't met, even if it wasn't your fault that the condition wasn't met, the get is still valid. Another Gemara. Ahuda Amalei said to this is an interesting Gemara. Another story. A man said to his wife, if we don't reconcile with each other for the next 30 days, have a get, this is your get. So he gives his wife a get and says, if we don't reconcile, then this is your get. Ozel Paisa, he tried to reconcile with her and make shalom bayis, like if Paisa, and she didn't go for it. She didn't want to reconcile with him. So is it a good get? Rav Yosef said certainly it's a good get. Did he give her a sack of gold coins? Even though he doesn't have gold coins. But the only excuse that would be accepted is no excuse. There's no excuse. If she was requesting a sack of gold coins, he would have had to give it to her. The fact that he can't afford a sack of gold coins is no excuse. The fact, and what remains is that she didn't reconcile with him, so it's a valid get. Ika de Amri, others say no, it's not a valid get. Amr Rabbi Yosef, mi de takav de didn't boil a mace of law. Does he have to give her a sack of gold coins? If she doesn't want to reconcile, it's not his fault. He's doing his best. Paisa, paisa. He's trying to reconcile, and she's not going for it. So, what's the machlekes between these two versions? One opinion holds we accept this last version holds we accept an excuse that's not your fault in getting to break the condition, and therefore the get is not valid. But the previous opinion was the previous opinion holds no excuses valid when it comes to getting. If you don't, the condition's not met, then we don't accept an excuse. That's the reason why the condition wasn't met. The condition wasn't met. The get automatically becomes valid. New Mishnah. Hamalbe moyes as a kohen v'es a levi v'es a oni lias mafresh aleim mechelkoin mafresh aleim mecheskes shein kayamim. This is a new din. A person loaned money to a kohen or a levi or per person. He loaned them, let's say, $1,000, and then he says that I know you don't have where to pay me, but I know I'm going to give off trumas, maestras, maisa'ani from my produce. So whatever I was supposed to give off, I'm going to use that. I'm supposed to give to you. I'm going to use that separation to pay me myself back. So then it's valid, and you can do it. We're not concerned. Maybe the kohen died or the Levi died, and you're really not supposed to keep it. Or maybe the poor person became wealthy, and this poor person doesn't get meiser ani. So that was the deal with this person. Mesu. Now, by the way, it's really a bet over here. He lent this kohen, Levi, and poor person money. It's a bet that if his field produces maestras, he'll be able to collect and pay himself back. What happens if his field does not produce maestras? Then he can't go back after the kohen, Levi, and the poor person for the money. He is taking a bet that I'm going to take it from my field, and if I don't get it, then I'm moichel you the money that I lent you. That's a very important point. Mesu, what happens if the kohen and the Levi died? Then you have to make the condition again with the inheritors of the kohen, Levi, and the ani, because they are required to pay the obligations of their parents, of their father, and maybe they don't want you to keep the maestras or the trumas that you would normally give to them. So you have to remake the condition with the yorshim. Says the Mishnah, im hilvim b'fnei bezdin. But if this loan, the guy makes a loan to the kohen and Levi and the poor person in front of a bezdin, and then that guy dies, the kohen dies, the Levi dies, so then you can continue to collect from your maestras and keep it, and you don't have to you don't have to take permission from the poor from the inheritors. Why? Because if they're not around, if this kohen, Levi, and poor person's not around, then the Bezdin said that the entire kahuna people, all the kohens, all the Levis are responsible that not to take from the trumas and maestras from this lender, because their first responsibility is to pay back one of their brother's loans, the kohen's loan, the Levi's loan, or the poor person's loan. And the reason is because in order to create a market where people will lend kohen and Levi and ani, they made sure that if you do it in front of Bezdin will make sure that you can get paid back, albeit by the trumas and maestras that you're supposed to give, you can collect that back to pay your loan. And that allowed people to have an open capital markets to lend to the kohen and Levi and the poor person. So now the Gemara asks a few questions. The afal gav, the loy asali day. The question is, how could you keep how could you keep the trumas and the maestros for yourself? You first have to give it to the kohen. You first have to give it to the Levi, and then the poor person. Then he gives it back to you. How could it work without you giving it to them? Amar Rav gives the teretz b'makire kurevelia. These kohen and Levi and the poor person that he's lending to is the normal person that he gives off his trumas and maestros through. So we consider it as almost as if they received it already, and therefore he doesn't have to physically give it to them. Ushmuel Amar Shmuel says b'mzake lehem hayedei chayim. He actually somebody else takes it on the behalf of the kohen and Levi and the poor person. There's another person involved here in the Mishnah that this lender says to this person, you take this trumas or maestros on behalf of so-and-so, the borrower, the kohen, the Levi that I lent money to, and then give it to people back because they're paying me back from that trumas or maestros. Ula says, Hamani Rabbi Yossi, our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yossi, the Amar also she'ein zoich, even if the kohen and the Levi and the poor person never took possession of the trumas and maestros, that we consider it as if they took possession of trumas and maestros. And again, the reason is to make it easier on the lender to feel confident that he's going to get paid back. So therefore, we don't have to have any third party over here. Just the verbal agreement of him lending the kohen Levi money gives him the right to be able to collect that money from the trumas and maestros that he's supposed to give off to them. So the Gemara says, "Kuli karav loy amri b'makira loy ketani, kishmul like amri mezake loy ketani, ulinami like amri ki chadagi like makminim." All these Rav, Shmuel, and Ula gave terutzim how to answer the Mishnah, but each one didn't hold like Rav, because Rav says it's talking about a kohen and Levi that he normally gives, and our Mishnah doesn't mention that. Shmuel says that there's a third person here who's mezakeh on behalf of the kohen and Levi, and that's not mentioned in the Mishnah. And Ula said our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yossi. Rabbanan argue on that, and therefore we don't like Ula's teretz, is because it comes out according to one person. Our Mishnah goes according to the Rabbi Yossi and not the Rabbanan. Anyway, that just was a side teretz. Now let's get to the crux of the issue, and a few more minutes here. Rabbanan. Hamalve Mois is kohen ves Levi is ani lias mafresh alei mechelken. Again, our Mishnah repeated in the Brisa that a man lent money to a kohen Levi and a poor person, but the trumas and maestros that he's supposed to give them, he'll keep. And remember, it's a bet. It's a bet that if his field grows enough fruit, and he'll be able to collect back his loan. But if it doesn't, well, he lost his loan. Mafresh alei mecheskes ken kiyomim. He could set aside assuming they're still alive. Upoisik imohem kishar hazol. The ain boy mishum ribis. There's no ribis over here. Basically, what it means is, if he loaned him $1,000, if he loaned the kohen and the Levi $1,000, so right now let's say he would get 1,000 pounds worth of fruit. Now, if it turns out by the time he collects the loan back and he's paying himself back, the price of fruit went down, and he's going to get 1,200 pounds of fruit. So he's getting potentially more than the price that was going when he lent the money. That's also good, and there's no ribis involved in that. The aim shvius mishmatoi, and the shmita would not cancel this loan. So we could always, even if shmita comes, after shmita, he could still collect and pay himself back. But if he wants to retract and say, "Oh, you know what? I don't want to pay myself back for my produce. I want the kohen and Levi to give me cash back." There's no backseas once this deal is made. Nishyosha Bailim, let's say his field got flooded, and then he said, "Oh, I give up. I'm never going to collect my loan." And then what happened was, it turned out that he read it wrong. The field started to produce. Ein mafresh aleim, ein mafresh nala of it. The Brisa says that once you gave up hope from collecting your loan back, you cannot collect over here again. So we're going to explain. The Gemara is going to explain over here. Amar Mar, poisik iman kishar hazol. So you could accept with him that the price of fruit that you're paying yourself back will be at the cheaper price at the time that your field starts producing. So pshita. So the Gemara says that's simple. Why does the Brisa have to tell me that? Al kamashmal, the Brisa is teaching you Even though they didn't make this condition, it's as if they made this condition. Because again, if that benefits the lender, we're going to give the advantage to the lender in order to open the capital markets so that the Kahanim and the Leviim have a place to borrow money. Remember, nobody wants to lend a coin money. Okay, it's like lending a koil guy money. You're not sure if you're going to get paid back. So that was the way to open the capital markets, by allowing the person to lend money and then keep the trumas and maasros that he would normally give to the kohen. There's no, if you end up with more than what you loaned him, there's no ribbis over here. My tama, since this is there's no interest over here, because what happens is it's a bet. And in case that your field didn't produce any fruits to give off trumas and maasros, you lost your loan. And because of that, so it's not really a bet. It's more like a business transaction. So we don't consider it ribbis if you end up with more money, more produce than you loaned the person. And shvius would not cancel such a transaction to like karina belayigash, because it's not called pressuring, because you're not collecting from the Kohen and Levi, you're collecting from yourself, and therefore Shemitah would not cancel such a transaction. The lender cannot cancel this deal with the Kohen and Levi, but the Kohen and Levi could cancel the deal with the lender. Why? As long as we consider it not like a loan. When the Kohen receives the money from this lender, quote unquote, basically he's selling the lender the rights that he has for his trumas and maasros, but he never took possession of the trumas and maasros. So as long as he didn't take possession of the trumas and maasros, it's not really he owns the trumas and maasros, and therefore it never came into the hands of the borrower, which is the Kohen and Levi. Therefore, if the Kohen and Levi, who is the borrower, wants to back out of such a deal, and he says, you know what, I'll pay you money back, he could do that. But the lender cannot do that. Because something that's, if the guy says, oh, my field was flooded, I'll never get my loan back. If it turns out that you gave up hope, you can never collect it back. Even now, if it grew again, and you could offer trumas and maasros. So the Gemara says pshita, like shrichad akin by the same akanta milsehi kamash v'lam. It's pashut what we're trying to say over here, because if a person said that he gave up hope and from collecting the trumas and maasros, certainly he can't now collect it again, because he says it was years. But the chiddush over here is maybe he misread it. The field dried out while it was still in stalks. So it happens, there's a high percentage that it looks like it's dry, and he gave up hope for the wrong reason, because there's a good chance that it'll rejuvenate and he'll have where to take off trumas and maasros from. But the fact is, since he said, I give up, once he says, I give up, that means he says that the loan is, he'll never collect on this loan. Even if the trumas and maasros start growing, even if the fruits start growing on this field, he won't be able to collect. Another two more minutes. We just want to turn the page. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Rab Lezer ben Yaakov says, Hamalva mois is koyin v'salevi bebezdin u'meisu mafresh aleim becheskes oishe hashavit. A guy lent money to a koyin and Levi, and you got to remember again, they're trying to open the capital markets to the Kohen and Levi who have no business. And so the deal was that he'll keep the trumas and maasros, and that will be the way he's going to collect on the loan. If the Levi or the Kohen died, then you could still keep the trumas and maasros, because the responsibility of paying back this guy belongs to the whole Kahanim, all the Leviim, and no Kohen and Levi will come and collect the trumas and maasros. They're going to give it back to the lender. If you loaned a poor person money in Bezdin, and then the poor person died, then you can still collect the Maisa Ani and keep the Maisa Ani, and you don't have to give it to another Ani, because all poor people agree that you should keep the money. Rab Achi, I mean, all poor people of the world agree that you keep the money. My Benayu, what's the difference between them? What's the difference between them? Ika Benayu, the following. Aniya Kusim, if poor people, let's say in this city, there are no poor people. There are only Samaritans that are poor people. If you learn that Samaritans are considered like Jews, then you can actually, one bandi amma will hold, you'll actually be able to keep your Baiser Ani. But according to the other opinion, that the poor Samaritan are considered like Goyim, so they have no right to the Maisa Ani. So really, there's nobody that you could give the Maisa Ani to in this city. So then you have to go to another city and give the Maisa Ani to somebody else, because the original person that you loaned the money in your city died. There are no other poor people in your city, and therefore nobody's there to guarantee the loan. And therefore, because of that, you can't keep the Maisa Ani. You have to send that Maisa Ani to somebody else, and you just lost your money that you loaned to the poor person. 2 more lines and then we'll stop. Asher Ani. If let's say the poor person became rich, so now, therefore, he has no right to collect your Maisa Ani. A mafresh olav. You cannot keep the Maisers because and the poor person, when he borrowed the money when he was poor, gets to keep the money. And the Maisa Ani that grows in your field, you have to give it to somebody else. So the Gemara says, Rabbanim, to understand why did the rabbis, it's a great question. We'll end with this question. Why is it when the poor person dies, the one that you loaned money to, you could still keep Meiser Ani? Why? You don't have to give the Meiser Ani to another poor person in the city, because that poor person wants you to keep the Meiser Ani, because there'll be more people loaning money to poor people, because we see that you're not going to lose the money that you loaned to the poor person. You'll still be able to keep the Meiser Ani. But if that poor person that you loaned money to became wealthy, then the lender lost his money. He has to give his Meiser Ani to somebody else, because the poor person that he gave to won the lottery and now cannot get Meiser Ani. So why didn't the Rabbanim say that, wait, this person should be able to keep the Meiser Ani because he loaned the person when he was a poor person. So the Gemara says, Misa Shchicha. The Rabbanans were protecting, if you loan a poor person and he dies, they're protecting you, because that's very common that a poor person dies. Ashirish lo Shchicha. But a poor person to become wealthy, that's not still common. And Amar Papa, and this is what will end. People say, if they tell you your friend died, Asher, you can believe that person. If you tell him your friend Itasher, he was poor person, he suddenly hit it big, Loita Asher, don't believe it. Especially poor people generally think small, so it's hard for them to get out of that box. And that's the point that the rabbis didn't consider if the person that you loaned money to actually became wealthy. Okay, I'm stopping over here.